So welcome everybody to the talk this evening. The theme of the talk is self-compassion and the spring equinox, which happened a month ago about. So just to remind you about claiming yourself, letting yourself exist, compassion towards all aspects of yourself. I just want to say to you that I welcome your history, your quirks, your ambiguities, your ignorance, your doubts, your questions, your wisdom, your grace, your generosity, your mental and physical wellness, your wounds and scars, your ambitions and sacred connections. And that's only a limited list. You could probably add a few things that need welcoming. And yesterday I welcomed for myself I have to say it this way. I was facilitating a meeting on the farm. It was very difficult, very emotional. And one of the people said, "Oh, you're pedantic." And surprisingly, I just said, "Yeah, I can claim that." And then we moved on. Because it has about the substance of a bubble on the river, as the Buddha said. It's an adjective. Do I want to define myself? Do you want to define yourself? Make it yourself. So we're really looking at how we solidify ourselves, or how we just let ourselves flow like the river that we are, of all sorts of movements. So to get back to the equinox and the relevance of that, it happened about a month ago, where the sun is directly over both hemispheres, so that dark and light is equal. Day and night is equal in length for a very short time. And I've always seen it as the lived experience of the journey of our universe that represents the profound teachings of the non-clinging mind and the teaching that's within that, the liberating teaching of not self. Because our suffering arises from clinging to this over that, and that's where we form our identity, what we cling to. And awareness does not preference, for example, with the light over dark. Life does not preference light over dark. So it's these preferences that we need to really be looking at. And the list of the 8 worldly conditions embraces every form of suffering arising from preferences, because we tend to see the world through the lens of opposites. And the 8 worldly conditions are loss and gain, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, and success and failure. And of course, we all know which side of that duality we'd be clinging to. So clearly that comment about being pedantic was a blame. So if I'm clinging to praise, then I'm going to be upset, because it wasn't praise. It's actually being called pedantic is regarded as an insult. So we really need to watch our minds swinging between these opposites, and because we get caught in the push and pull, because we are caught in the desire and aversion of that push and pull. I want this, I want that. I don't want this, I don't want that. And suffering is a common bond with all of us, with all beings, regardless of our background and life experience. And when we truly understand suffering and its causes, compassion can arise in us. So when we lean into our opinions and preferences, difference and conflict arise. And that's both inner and outer. We have inner conflict with leaning into those preferences, or outer conflict. And so the sense of a very particular self identity arises through the process of fixating on our opinions and preferences. What we experience as self is not fixed. It is an ongoing process, like an ever-flowing, braided river of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So, that comment of pedantic was just a little bit of flotsam and jetsam on that ever-flowing river of form and fit. So it might have struck a bit at feeling and perception, but it's just like a bubble on a river. We don't want to identify with it. Those are the 5 aggregates where we attach self: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, where we place me, I, and mine. So understanding that clinging to opinions and preferences causes suffering, and the illusion of a fixed self, understanding the illusion of a fixed self, is wise view. Wise view is the first link of the Noble Eightfold Path, and it is through self-compassion that we can work through clinging to opinions and preferences and realize wise view. So realize, when we say realize, it means make real our understanding. Make it real, not just a theory. That's what we're doing as we watch our mind, investigate the push and pull, the risings and passings in our mind and body as we sit here. So we're making real, we're realizing the impermanence of things and the impermanence of a sense of a fixed self. So we shift from the view, as we realize this, we shift from the view that light is preferable to dark. We shift to the view that because dark is, light is. We shift from positive is preferable, positive is preferable to negative, to the view that because negative is, positive is. And you could say with this more recent one that I'm talking about, because pedantic is, then what's the opposite of pedantic? Imprecise is. Because pedantic is, imprecise is. We don't need to fixate on either one of those. We can just rest without fixating on that. If we aren't attaching ourselves to a certain identity of perfection, or whatever it is that's going to stop us doing that. So the equinox movement within the vast universe, in which our tiny planet rotates on its axis and orbits the sun, is a beautiful reminder of this. Because of the causes and conditions of the position of the earth in relation to the sun, there is equal dark and equal light. Light is because dark is. And this is the understanding of the inseparability of all things. So instead of rotating on the axis of desire and aversion and orbiting around the sun of a fixed identity self, we can rest in the wisdom of wise view or right view. And we have a moment by moment reminder whilst you sit here observing the breath. The in-breath is because the out-breath is. We can't preference one or the other. We have to have both. The in-breath is because the out-breath is. It reminds us the pointlessness of attaching to one side of a duality. So the equinox can also be a celebration of immeasurable mind. And compassion is one of the 4 immeasurable minds, which includes loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And compassion and self-compassion is only possible because one makes an intention to stop measuring. Measuring is preferences, is hanging on to preferences and fixed views. This is better than that. So wise intention is the second link of the Eightfold Path. So we're progressing along, although the Eightfold Path is not linear, but it's a nice idea that we're progressing along the Eightfold Path. So this is entirely achievable through the process of noticing the unpleasant sensations of experience instead of reacting against them, bringing the immeasurable mind of self-compassion to whatever is arising by giving it space to exist, allowing yourself to exist. It will fight. If we won't allow it to exist, it will fight to exist. And this is how inner struggle and conflict arises, and very big tensions in the body arise, our efforts to push away aspects of ourself. So awareness is that which knows the experience of being itself. Awareness is that which knows the experience of being itself. Your particular expression of humanity, that which you have named me, is revealed by awareness, and awareness wants to know itself. Awareness is without limitation. The limitations that your mind creates are not inherent in the nature of things. And the limitations that you put on yourself do not block awareness. They are revealed by awareness. They do not block awareness, they are revealed by awareness. It's a powerful insight and understanding that really supports letting go of clinging. And I've been reading a book, I read it a little while ago, called The Smallest Lights in the Universe. And it's a memoir of an astrophysicist, a very recent one published this year, an astrophysicist called Sarah Seeger. And her passion is to find exoplanets. And this is the name astronomers have given to planets that may have signs of extraterrestrial life. Now, you just have to put aside any thoughts about the enormous cost of this project and just bear with me on this. What interests me about this is the enormous curiosity, the marvelous and unfathomable curiosity that humans have. And they are searching in the farthest reaches of space, thousands of light years away or millions of light years away. Inspiring. So I would like that to think that we bring that same sort of curiosity, investigation, and passion for this practice to our practice at all times, or as much as we can. Maybe we can't do it at all times. So in her reflections on her work, Sarah comments, she says this: in a field as vast and daunting as ours, mentors are important. The best ones show you not only where to look, but how to see. And I was just struck by that is exactly what the Buddha is. He is the best mentor of all, because this is what his teaching embodied: where to look and how to see. Where to look towards body, feelings, mind states, and how to see, wise view. So we are so habituated to looking in the wrong direction, which is towards the external rather than the internal. And Sarah Seeger makes a poignant reflection relevant to her work about the dangers of habituated thinking, which blinds us to seeing what we are looking for. So she says, in looking for signs of life on the exoplanet, she says, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were going to miss something. And that something she has italicized. So Sarah adjusted her approach from looking for the familiar and expected to expanding her view. And this is the invitation here, that we don't come with a mind that's full of the familiar and expected. And that's why, people that are new to practice often have, they don't have a mind full of the expected because they haven't been sitting for a long time. And I think there might be some of you here who are fairly new to practice. It's a fresh, and it's been called in the Zen tradition, beginner's mind, that we all need to have beginner's mind. So how do the teachings of the Buddha instruct us to expand our view? So at the core of this is letting go of hyper conceptuality. The mind filled with beliefs, ideas, speculations, mental fabrications about our world, and opening the sense doors to intimate connection with our world, both inner and outer, so that we see the inner and outer are not separate, and that the inner and outer condition each other. We are looking to take off the obscuring screen door of our conceptual mind. It's more like, I think, a bank vault door, the conceptual mind, and open the sense doors to the world unobstructed. So self-compassion over the last few years has become a bit of a buzzword in the Dharma and therapy world. And the trouble is when something becomes a buzzword, a bit like mindfulness that was raised today, in the inquiry, and Angela mentioned it as well. We get a bit, it's a buzzword, and we get a bit tired of it because it carries an aura of familiarity, and that tends to diminish our curiosity. The familiar, when we live with someone for a long time, we make up things about them instead of actually seeing them for who they are. We actually often have a relationship with our views and opinions about the other person. And so to wake up from this socially conditioned trance of limitations and contractions around this idea that we are a fixed identity, we need curiosity. And it's more traditionally known, as we've been talking about today, is investigation, the second factor of awakening. So without curiosity, insight will be limited and superficial. And this is a simple but also difficult practice because it goes against us wanting to give so much authority to the conditioned and pervasive harshness and divisiveness of the conceptual mind. But these teachings offer a medicine that invites us to explore our inner world from a perspective of self-compassion. And it was often said that the Four Noble Truths was a diagnosis of the illness of dis-ease that we have and the medicine for curing that. Self-compassion is the wisdom of a measurable mind that can give room to anger, irritation, desire, hurt, other feelings, the whole range of feelings, grief, loss, disability, aging, the unpleasant and painful, because it is not trying to use the limited capacities of the conceptual mind to find a way around the unfathomable, the incomprehensible, and often the seemingly unbearable. The conceptual mind will only bring the dead end that is characterized by such phrases as, I have to get rid of this feeling. This is a very common phrase. I have to get rid of this thought, this sensation. This should not be happening in my inner world. These feelings are negative and I should not be negative. That's a very common one, especially when in the area where I live, which it comes out of that, the bright siding effect of a certain distortion of these ancient teachings. Or I am a bad person for having these feelings. And the more subtle, and this is quite subtle, I feel bad, therefore I am bad. This is something we often would have felt as a child. I feel bad, therefore I am bad. And we have forgotten that this is a child's way of putting the world together. And that's all a child could do. It's not a fault of the child, but we don't need to carry that belief with us. I feel bad, therefore I am bad. And then when we start that mental, those mental formations, that mental fabrication about therefore I am bad, we build a painful edifice against ourselves, which we then treat as our identity, becomes very solid and fixed in our mind. And another one that's a little more subtle is very common. I need these feelings to move through. Now, this is a more modern way of saying I need to, let's say, it's very common because perhaps it's regarded as a nicer way of saying I want to get rid of this, or a more veiled way of saying I want to get rid of this. I need these feelings to move through. No, well, they're not going to move through at the pace you want them to move through. They will move through at their own pace because you didn't invite them and you can't make them leave. And so what we do is we create the conditions for them not getting locked into our mind and our body by making room and space for them, not creating an identity around it. So if we examine our relationship with unpleasant appearances, so all these things that arise and pass in our inner and outer world, we can call appearances, because they are appearing and then they are fading, appearing and fading. And some appear for longer than others, and some take longer to fade, but that's how life is, appearing and fading. That we examine our relationship with unpleasant appearances that arise without making them wrong or bad. If we do that, we are well on the way to allowing them to exist. So we need to notice that habit of mind, that's a conditioned habit of mind that probably started when we got put in the corner at school. I don't know if they do that anymore, but when I was at school, you got put in the corner. You might have just been having a nice little joke with a friend who's sitting beside you. So instead of the poor teacher saying, oh, I really love your excited energy, but this is not the place for it right now. They make it wrong and bad and put it in the corner. So that's how we get to have that. So it's conditioned in many various ways. So it's not our fault that it's there, and it is our responsibility, if we want to not live a life of limitations and suffering, that we look into how we keep those things fixed into our identity. So this is a practice of self-compassion, a quivering. Compassion is a quivering of the heart for others. Self-compassion is a quivering of your own heart for yourself. And if we don't have a quivering of our own heart for ourselves, it is very difficult to have a quivering of our heart for the other. So that quivering of the heart for yourself is opening to the vulnerability of being human. Human, we are subject to the causes, to many causes and conditions. And that's the nature of life. So when we forget to bring self-compassion to the appearances and try to get rid of a thought, a feeling, a sensation, an emotion, we become deeply tangled in aversion, in self-hatred. And hatred is one of the 5 hindrances. And it is called a hindrance because it gets in the way of clarity of mind. It gets in the way of clear seeing. And the hindrances, although they're called hindrances, are not something we're not trying to get rid of anything. It's just a hindrance to clear seeing. If it arises, if aversion and hatred arise, then what we want to do is investigate it, what it's like to have it there, how we clamp down on ourselves, the tension, the contraction, the unpleasant emotions and so on that goes with it. So we need to see that inner experiences arise and pass due to causes and conditions, and are not. We don't put them there. We're not consciously making them there, and we're not consciously able to make them go away. I don't think any one of us wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I think I'll feel bad today. I don't think any one of us does that. We just wake up feeling bad for many causes and conditions that sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't. We just feel bad today. So we need to remember that when we observe the arising and passing of unpleasant inner experiences, they tend to fade over time. But we also have to remember that we're not observing them because we know, oh, if I observe this, it'll go away, because then we're back into a more subtle fight and resistance against it, a more subtle form of aversion. So when we cling to unpleasant experiences, we project something onto that appearance in the body that's not there. We project a quality of good or bad, positive or negative. And it's in that way that we identify with it, that we make it I, me, or mine. And this means we've given it a solidity that it does not have. And then there is a contraction. So if I had rejected that comment about being pedantic, instead of just receiving it and seeing, it's just like, it was so quick. Nothing really passed much through my mind when I said, yes, I can claim that. there's just a flowing. There is not a clamping down. There is not a resistance. I then don't have to make the person who said it into a, an enemy or a foe or a bad person or someone to go and have a conflict with and so on. We can just let it go. And of course, this doesn't mean that you don't have skill in the world of form. There are certain things that you do need to sort out with other people. And there's certain things that we can just let go. So if we don't let it go, if we do make it solid and there is a contraction, what we can do is shift the attention from the original unpleasant sensation to the contraction. And that's how we can work with the hindrances, because that contraction is also an appearance and it will also fade as long as we're not doing it in order to make it fade. So that we can see this arising and passing as we sit here, just like the breath, in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. And when you can allow yourself to exist in this way, there is a deep sense of inner peace and spaciousness, the spaciousness of a measurable mind, of self-compassion and equanimity. It is a coming home to yourself and seeing the self as a flow of life. And it is sometimes called being whole. People say, I want to be whole. But there's somehow a misunderstanding that being whole means cutting off bits of ourselves that we don't like, fracturing, getting rid of parts of ourselves that we don't like. That is not the meaning of whole. Just as we don't say at the equinox, the life doesn't say at the equinox, light is better than dark, because dark is because light is because dark is. So I was thinking about, when I was writing whole, W-H-O-L-E, I was thinking about whole foods. They are foods that have their husks and their hulls and things on like that, their skins. And, we have a small herd of Jersey cows and we have milk here, and it's whole milk. And that means it's milk with all its whatever's in that haven't been boiled out by pasteurization. And that's whole milk. It's got all its bits and pieces in there, and that's healthy. If you, if milk is your thing. So here's what it looks like if we can. Here's some examples. I just want to finish with some examples of how just specific things that I came across in the last little while, of examples of what happens when you can allow all of yourself to exist. So a friend told me the other day that she had 4 texts in one day from 4 different friends saying they needed space. I need space. And I have very vivid memories of needing space in the same way. And it's usual to look for space externally. And it is especially difficult to find space for those who are in lockdown situations. And the sort of looking for space is very different from the wise action of finding time for solitude, finding a balance between interconnection with others and solitude. Because in that I need space, there is usually some sense of reactive desperation associated with it. But what is amazing, what I found amazing, is when you turn your attention inward and let all of yourself exist, when you're not trying to get rid of any aspect of your inner experience, then you no longer need space in that desperate sort of manner. And you can seek solitude, happily seek solitude, but not try and get away. And seeking that desperate needing of space is actually trying to get away from yourself, which you can't, because as John Kabat-Zinn said, wherever you go, there you are. So that was my own experience of many years of having that desperate need for space. When I started letting myself exist, that all dropped away. And here's another story of how self-compassion, of letting all of yourself exist, leads to wise action on behalf of others. And so I've been a mediator and facilitator for 3.5 decades, and I've retired from that, and retired from mediation and conflict management, probably about 7 years ago or something. However, I still take on a facilitation role for the community here and for social action groups. So I did it for 4 years for the gas-field-free Northern Rivers, and I thought that was it. But now they're going to put a huge dam in a rainforest gully and not far from the village where I live. And so now I am facilitating the no dam meetings, or the dam meetings. Yeah, so I do it a bit still. And recently I facilitated a meeting where I had a lot of aversion for the opinion and preference of one of the participants. And that opinion and preference that person held was also the source of conflict for the group. So having aversion as a facilitator is a common occurrence, because no one is neutral. We're not, ongoing, consistently neutral. We might have moments where we have, neutral experience of Vedana, but we are not neutral. So acknowledging and letting the presence of aversion be there, making room for it to exist, allows one to act neutrally on behalf of the person or the group. So the aversion was there. And if I had suppressed that aversion, then what I'm actually, because I can't suppress, because it's very hard to suppress aversion we just saw with what we were working, some of the inquiries today. It's very hard to suppress aversion. So the only other option would have been to shut up the pesky, person with the pesky views that people found difficult. So then you're not going to make room for all the voices in the room. And a healthy group is a group where all the voices can exist, just as a healthy person is a human being where all parts of them can exist. So I felt my aversion, and I didn't have to manipulate the person and make them, try and make their preferences change. I didn't have to manipulate the outside world so I could make my aversion go away. It's a very common thing that we do, especially in our one-to-one relationships, because that would be a huge mistake. It would be a mistake of looking in the wrong direction. So the direction that is going to help is the direction of the aversion and giving it room to exist. So it freed the mind and creates a space for wise action on behalf of all concerned. So it's a couple of examples of how letting ourselves exist, then it then filters out into wise speech and wise action and so on. So the practice of a measurable mind of self-compassion is especially valuable at this time when our usual connections and distractions are not available. So let us learn in this pandemic, especially for the people who've been experiencing lockdown in Melbourne, and I know there's people here who haven't been in lockdown. Let us learn in this pandemic pause and not forget self-compassion. When the pause that is called changes into sorry, I've got that all mixed up. That when this pause changes into something else, whatever that will be, because we have to think that it's been a pause in normal, and it's going to go back to normal. Well, things don't. I mean, nothing. Anyone who's been practicing insight for a long time would know that nothing happens twice. Nothing happens twice, ever. We try and recreate something, we can't do that. So something, we don't know what it's going to be, but something different is going to be there. So I'd just like to finish with a poem, and I just have incredible gratitude to the poets and the songwriters. There's been some wonderful poems and songs about the pandemic. They're so up to date. Poets and songwriters are so up to date, and they take us to our heart, not our head. And in the words of an unknown member of the Sioux Nation, I think it was, attributed to, the longest journey is from our head to our heart. And I guess that's the journey that I have been talking about here, from mental fabrication to self-compassion, to our heart. So here is this marvelous poem called Pandemic by Lynn Unger. And she writes in the 3rd month of this year, what if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has become clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. So let's just have a moment of silence. So